Hail, hail, the Celts are here, and what the hell do we care now, guys? It's the third time we're here on the channel getting prepared for some Champions League action, and after the way match day 2 went with the Dortmund disaster, as it's been called, we're now going away to Bergamo to take on the high-flying, free-scoring Italian Serie A outfit of Atalanta, the current Europa League holders, in a game that when this draw was originally made, I think we all accepted, like, listen, Dortmund away and Atalanta away, those games might be a bit of a stretch for us. Those are the games that, hey, if we didn't come out of it with anything, we're not going to be that surprised. But the way match day 2 went for Dortmund, for me, this game has now changed its complexion. I'm undecided whether it's completely or ever so slightly. We had a nice little title challenge this weekend against Aberdeen, of course. You know, maybe that'll serve as well as good preparation coming into this game versus some of the domestic matches we've had before coming into Champions League games. But for me now, this game has taken on a whole different complexion where it's not just about the points, it's not just about the scoreline, but we need to take something out of this game, whether it is just a moral victory, if we can use that expression, you know, but we need to come out of this game not feeling battered and bruised, not feeling like the whipping boys, and feeling like, hey, there is a level playing ground that we can get to where we can actually take on these opponents. The manager's post-match comments after Borussia Dortmund had my head spinning with confusion, like, how can he see things this way? And I was hoping it was hot smoke and mirrors and all that kind of stuff, and hopefully coming into this game, Celtic and Brendan Rodgers have a different plan of attack. They've got a different angle of approach that they can take coming into this game. In the video today, we're going to look at what Atalanta offer, how they're going to try and attack us, how they're going to try and win the match, and ultimately how I think Celtic should be shaping up and what we're going to need to do, whether we like it or not, if we are going to keep the game tight enough where we can maybe nick something, maybe even go above and beyond that and cause a shock, but at the very least not getting our asses handed to us by the end of it at any point in the video. If you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We are pushing for 10,000 subscribers and we're this close to it. We cannot do it without your support. So if you do enjoy the content here, smash that subscribe button, hit the like button if you enjoy the video, of course, and get into the comment section and let me know what your thoughts, your feelings, your expectations, your trepidations might be before we play Atalanta on Wednesday night. And yeah, let's just get stuck straight into it. Because this is a game that since the draw was made was the one I personally was the most fearful for in terms of having that egg on your face, that embarrassing sort of result. And if we have a look at how Atalanta have been shaping up and performing this year already in the Champions League and in Serie A, you might see why this was the one that worried me the most, certainly. Atalanta for the last couple of years have been finishing consistently in the Champions League positions in Serie A, and really no matter, you know, they've had a lot of changes in their squad, they sell lots of players, they bring in lots of new ones, they're a very high turnover squad, as it were. The one constant is the manager Gasperini, and the one constant is the style of play. And as you can see, they started off their season here with an emphatic 4-0 victory against Lecce, where they've played a bit of a 3-5-2 with Bresciani, if I can say that, in the attacking midfield position here, bagging 2 goals on his debut. Bresciani, if that's how you say it, is much more of a defensive midfielder, but I've not seen too much of him throughout the rest of the season. I think he's maybe picked up a bit of an injury. But as you can see here, with a 2-1 loss away to Torino, they've had that 3-4-3 shape. Again, a lot of constants with their defence and the way their midfield is built, as well as the attack in terms of the personnel and how they're going to go and try about and do that. They lost 4-0 away to Inter Milan, which isn't anything to, you know, hold against them. Inter Milan have been the dominant force in Serie A for a few years, and Inzaghi's squad at the moment is all conquering domestically, but it does show you that this style of play can concede goals. You know, Atalanta do leave everything out there on the pitch. They're a real gambit team where they really do try and take high risks to try and get those high level rewards. And Inter Milan were 4-0 up in this game by the 56th minute. By half-time, it was 3-0. And the reason I want to bring that detail into this is if you look at the substitutions here, they've only made one change for the defender that was absolutely honking with Bellanova for Toloi. But then the other 2 subs have came in the last 10 minutes. So regardless of being like 4-0 down, they've not changed their style. They've not really changed their shape. They've not tried to go and rescue the match. They're just kind of trying to go on as they were. When we look at the 3-2 win that they had against Fiorentina, again, you're going to see a lot of the same names and faces, the same style of play, the same shape. And again, this is a team that don't care about conceding goals. It's all about what they're going to try and do in attack. But that then kind of pales in contrast to the 0-0 draw that they had at Arsenal, because when they're at home to Arsenal in the Champions League, one of, you know, the first game of the Champions League this season, they understand that against this different opponent that they have to attack the game slightly differently, and they have to be a bit tighter. They have to be a bit more careful with the ball, and they have to try and pick their moments. If you watch this game, it was a very resolute defensive performance, and you can see with all the player ratings out of 100 here, that the midfield 4 and the midfield 3 essentially became a bit of a back 7 to resist the Arsenal onslaught, as it were. And then it was all about trying to counter-attack with CDK, Lookman and Retegui. They then follow that up with a 3-2 loss at home to Como, which I think is one of the first results Celtic fans looked at and thought, oh, we might actually, they're not that invincible, they're not that all-conquering. But again, this is a team that's going punch for punch, very consistent starting 11, very consistent style of play. They then follow that up with a 1-1 draw against Bologna, who are also a Champions League outfit. There's that Bresciani injury we mentioned. But as we get closer to the current time of the season, you'll see that the bench is a lot more active, it's a lot more vibrant, and the players that they're bringing off the bench are potentially best 11 players for their squad. They then go into their next Champions League game away to Shakhtar Donetsk and win that by 3-0. Now, we've played Shakhtar over the last couple of years. They've lost Mudryk, they've lost Trubin, they've lost some of their bigger players. So I think we know the style of play that Shakhtar deploy, the level of their squad, and we know that Shakhtar are going to sit in and try and counter-attack, and Atalanta really did just take them to the cleaners here. As you can tell by looking at all their performance metrics out of 100, they've had lots and lots of possession, and all their players have been really successful with passes and duels, is camping Shakhtar into their own half. And then with the chances they've made, they've managed to take them with the right back popping up with a goal, centre back scoring from a corner, and then Lookman being the main guy in attack. Follow that up with a 5-1 victory against bottom half side Genoa, where again, I can't say this enough, the consistency of selection, the consistency of the style of play. And once they get into, how many games have they played so far? By this time, about half a dozen. Their form and their rhythm is starting to really pick up here in a big, big way. We see Ederson, who's normally the destroyer, the defensive midfielder, getting involved in the goal, as well as the key men in attack, Lookman and Retegui, with Martin de Roon there bringing in a 98 out of 100 from this back three position where he walks into midfield. And in the last game they played just there at the weekend, away to Venezia, who have just been promoted from Serie B, they win that quite convincingly by 2-0, goals from Pasalic and Retegui. And this is a team that I do expect to line up against Celtic on Wednesday night, is this exact lineup that we have here. And likewise, failing Carter Vickers making a miraculous recovery from the weekend, or maybe they didn't play him against Aberdeen to play him against Atalanta on the Wednesday, but failing that, I don't suspect that we're going to see very many, if any, changes. Now, the problem or the worries that we've got coming into this match, of course, is how we are going to try and press, and how are we going to try and win the ball back in their half. Now, like I mentioned in the intro, Brendan Rodgers' comments really did send my head spinning, like when he was saying stuff like, we're not going to learn anything with 10% possession and all the rest of it, because like you've seen with Atalanta against Arsenal, you do need to understand your opponent, you do need to understand what they're bringing to the table that you can't do anything about, as well as thinking about what you bring to the table that the opposition can't do anything about. And I think that was the really naive part of the Borussia Dortmund game, where we allowed Hatate to be the pressing midfielder to join the forwards. We wanted Engels out in a wide pocket to join up with his pals that he's doing really well with, and then we're allowing McGregor to be close to the ball and to keep the banks, the rows, the formations of players quite tight, so there's not many spaces to play through. And if we do employ anything similar to that, we are going to get taken to the cleaners yet again. The way the front three works is very, very clever, and it kind of builds into what I'm talking about from the back here. So Retegui or Scamacca, when he was fit, whatever it might be, this is going to be their arrowhead forward. And then between the likes of Lookman and CDK, they have a lot of freedom to pop into the wide areas, maybe try and bully a fullback, or pop into pockets behind the midfield and try and link up with some of the players a bit more centrally. The wide players are going to be really, really, really wide. They're going to be hugging that touchline, and they're going to be going up and down, box to box. So this front five threat is the first thing that we need to think about when it comes to how we're actually going to shape up in this match, because we are going to have less possession in Atalanta. That is an absolute given. But when you've got that kind of that chevron kind of shape there, that 5-man attack, it puts a lot of pressure on the midfield. And this is where I think the change should have been made for the Dortmund match, and I would really like to see us playing with a bit of... We still want Engels to do what he's good at. We still want McGregor to do what he's good at. But you need this little bit more of a shield to come in here, so that the passing lanes are cut off, so there's less space for the likes of CDK to play in, same as Lookman. But Pasalic is much more of an attacking midfielder who is not going to be... I'm sure he'll be back helping out with progressing play or whatever, but he is much more of an attacking player that is going to support that kind of front chevron to make it into a bit more of an arrow, as it were, with Ederson being the shield in front of defence. Martin de Roon is a midfielder and generally is going to be coming into these positions here, which means when Atalanta are on the ball, they're going to have this kind of lopsided, disjointed shape where it is going to be putting us under pressure, it is going to be pushing us back, and it is about really just making sure that man for man they're not going to let anyone get away from them. And if I'm the manager of Celtic, and this is how I'm looking at how Atalanta are going to try and shape up through the match and how they're going to try and attack us, the number one thing I'm worried about is their fullbacks. I'm worried about Nicholas Kuhn getting dragged back into our own half, following Zappacosta, because Lookman is going to be a handful, and Alistair Johnson can't deal with both of those guys. Similar with Valley on this side of the pitch here, that, yeah, primarily he is going to be looking after Belanova, but you know that CDK, Charles de Ketelaere, is going to be popping into these wide areas here. If Pasalic is coming into this zone, and again, you can't have Valley getting doubled up on like this because it's just going to be an absolute car crash. You're going to need Daizen Maeda to do his big shift going up and down the line, watching out for Belanova. Belanova is a very, very attack-minded right wing-back. He really does want to get into these zones here, and if he has his way, he will drag Daizen all the way back up the pitch. But as you can see here, this gives us plenty of space to try and play out of, for us to try and counter-attack, for us to try and break away with pace, because the one thing that we do have in abundance with Kyogo, with Daizen Maeda and Kuhn is pace. You know, they have the ability to break away, and, you know, Kuhn can definitely kill a man. You know, he can definitely take a guy on the dribble and, you know, make that right decision, make that right ball, whether it is to play Daizen crashing in at the back post or whether it is a cutback for someone like Kyogo. And I feel that the pace in the front three is the primary route to goal that we should be looking for. It is the primary weapon that we have. So when these guys are on the ball, when Atalanta are trying to knit their play and they're trying to really quickly one touch, two touch stuff, play the ball up the line, let Zappacosta burst into the box, and then can they get guys on the end of it? The most important thing for us is having this midfield shield here, for me, of McGregor and Engels being the best candidates for this, and allowing Hatate to be the guy that is either on this side of the pitch. He has to have a lot more freedom to be on the left or on the right of the pitch, of the picture here, to try and find, like, if Zappacosta is the one that coming down on the left, you're probably going to be looking for Hatate in this position here, because CDK, Retegui and Lookman will all kind of magnetise along with Pasalic into this area here. And then you're going to see Belanova popping into this spot here and probably dragging Daizen back a little bit with him. So Hatate, for me, has to get that freedom to be the link, to be the escape route, to be the ejector seat, whatever you want to think of it as, so that when, you know, like they take a shot, Schmeichel catches it, or we get on the ball and we make a big clearance that we maybe need to play a bit blind, we want someone up there who is able to, you know, take the ball down, receive the ball under pressure, and be able to make a quick pass with it. Daizen Maeda isn't that guy. You know, if we're playing Daizen up here and we want him to try and take the ball on, or be comfortable with it in possession, be safe with it in possession, to make one pass to someone else who can then slice the ball, that's not going to work. Daizen, we need to play him into space. We need Daizen running. We need him putting them on the back foot facing their own goal. And if that's the sort of thing that's on, then brilliant. But most of the time, we are going to be looking for someone who is going to be peeling out, being the designated outball, as it were. Now, generally, you want somebody big and strong that can deal with a bit of a physical challenge in the air, as it were. But even if it is, like, not directly, like, dropped onto Hatate or Daizen, if we're looking at this side of the pitch, but maybe it's played into a little bit of space, these are the guys that we need, who are, like, tenacious, that can stay with the ball, that maybe if they don't win the first ball, they can try and win the second one, and they can get us out. Because if we have all the midfield coming back and being really tight and compact because they're being overran, with the likes of Darun coming in here, Pasalic and Charles de Ketelaere, like we've mentioned already, then we are only playing to Kyogo against two centre-backs that he'll have a really tough time against. And if Kuhn and Daizen are brought back into our own half, then playing a big Hail Mary, a big shell ball up here, it's just going to be too difficult for us to really get much out of it without it being crystal perfect, picture perfect, whatever you want to say. And even having someone that has their back to goal, that, you know, like, I'm talking about playing a big pass here, right? But even if, you know, we want to be quite dogmatic and no, we're not going to do that, we're going to try and build out and get out, you need someone who is operating on the edge of the game here, that isn't getting involved in the men that are running, you know, into our defensive third, into their attacking third, who can have his back to goal, that can see the play happening and can say, McGregor, fucking give it to me. And then as soon as that happens, if McGregor can get on his bike and then go and be the overload, it could be Engels as well, you know, but have that guy that can then run on and beyond, you play him in, and then hopefully, if you've got the right guys bouncing off and running into space, these are the ways that we're going to try and cause some problems for Atalanta, because we're not going to dominate possession, like I said. And like, when they are building out from the back, when they have their back three, come back in here with Darun, Ederson in tight as well, Pasalic, Bellanova will be back here. Now, I've stopped short of bringing the Celtic team up to the halfway line like we were doing in Dortmund. You don't want to be defending in your own half too deep where there's all this space to play in and maybe somebody can get some time and space on the ball to pick a pass. You do need the lines to be quite compact here, but we cannot be that high up the pitch because this is exactly what they want. If we are going to be this high up, like we were against Borussia Dortmund, they are just going to get the ball and play it over the top of us. And with the three guys that they're going to have to break away with, never mind if they can get a fourth man to come on and support, again, it's going to be a cricket score. It's going to be just as embarrassing as it was against Borussia Dortmund. So I hope this defensive line and the press that we have isn't as aggressive where we're sending, the whole front four up here to press and make it tight, then asking a lot of Engels and McGregor to cut off those passing lanes and to make sure that the ball doesn't get topped over our heads or played over the back of us. We do need to have some sort of middle ground where the defence is maybe a bit deeper. Maybe Valley is a little bit tighter as well, depending on how they're going to shape out. Maybe the same with Alistair Johnson. And you don't want to leave them with the ball up here, but I think you really do need to pick your battles a little bit more. And maybe we allow the press to happen, maybe later on in the game, once they have a false sense of security, rather than trying to go after the game right from the off. But for me, like the midfield, for us having McGregor, Hatate and Engels in this one, this is going to be where the general passages of play are going to be won and lost, because we will be overloading them in here. And if we can force them to try and commit other bodies to come back into this area of the pitch to try and, swing the balance of play back in their favour, then straight away we're taking some of their players away from the best thing that they can do. And I think this is part of the thing that Rodgers was trying to say, that I do think there's a lot of honour in, and I can get behind, in the sense of, you don't want to be too scared of the opposition where you totally revamp your style to accommodate them. You want to try and impose a bit of your game and a bit of your style of play on them. And I think the best way we can do that is with the midfield being a lot more compact and being a lot more disciplined and switched on to actually dictating the tempo and controlling the game as well, rather than having Hatate supporting the forwards, Engels all the way out here, and then McGregor just kind of loosey-goosey in between them all. We're just going to be ran over again in midfield. CDK will pop into this. Pasalic will be running around in blind spots and shadows. And then really, even just with the threat of Lookman coming in between these two guys and Retigui maybe having the same ability to pop out into this area, you know how it's going to go already. And this is something that we've seen from Celtic and we've seen under Brendan Rodgers over the last, year and a half or whatever. And for some reason, there's been this, resistance to doing it again, where, it used to be O'Reilly, but we would quite happily leave two guys sitting in there and let Hatate have just a lot more freedom to support the front three and to try and pick up some of these pockets of space, in transition and all the rest of it. And against Dortmund, we just never seen that. But then that means later on in the game, if you do want to bring someone on like Paulo Bernardo, he's coming into a space, he's coming into a section of the pitch, a tactical style that you can get the most out of him. You can get something out of his physical presence to be tight on the ball, get the ball from Trusty and Johnson, then try and play a ball into Kuhn or Kyogo or even Hatate himself. Whereas having Bernardo and Engels, for me, it does send the wrong message of we are going to fold and we are just going to try and defend Atalanta and not get horsed in this one. And, because, Bernardo in these areas here, he's going to be busy, he's going to chase the ball, he's going to be pressing like mad. But he doesn't offer that kind of shield. He doesn't offer that stability in this position here that I think he's really, really good at. And yes, you can flip the scripts later on by bringing on Hatate, by bringing on McKeown or whatever. But for me, the right balance in this midfield, because McGregor is going to be in this position, I think we all know that. If we did start this shape, which I was kind of up for against Dortmund, I think you want Engels and Bernardo in here, and then you allow McGregor. Maybe he's not going to be the press midfielder alongside the front three, but he can certainly just be a bit more of a playmaker, pick up the pockets of space that he wants to operate in, play off of the defensive midfielder, the defender, the opposition that he wants to play off of, and we could get a bit more joy out of that with him being a bit more disciplined, getting the ball out from the back, and then there's maybe some evolutions that could happen later on. But I don't think we're going to see a departure from the normal shape, which for me is why Rio and Engels having a slight adjustment, like Rio getting allowed a lot more freedom and Engels being told to kind of nip and tuck in a little bit more next to McGregor, I think is going to be what we need to get something out of this game. It just really helps as best as we possibly can to try and nullify their front three as well as their wide fullbacks that they'll be bombing on, as well as then when the ball does get turned over, we actually have players that can play together, look after the ball before trying to slice it out for Dyson, play it into Kyogo, get Kuhn away. Because the deceiving thing about this shape is that, they're playing their fullbacks so high, they've got a front three of real space and speed and quality, And the perception here is that the midfield is a bit thin. The midfield is a bit soft, as it were, because Pasalic will come up and support, and it's just Ederson. But it's not really, because De Bruyne will be in here, and then this defence, like, they don't mess about. You know what I mean? Like, they're pretty hard hitting, strong in the tackle, don't make any mistakes. And if you watch the Super Cup game, Real Madrid against Atalanta, you'll see that, like, the whole team is really well switched on to recovering as a team, defending as a team, as well as attacking as a team. And our best hope is going to be attacking when they are shaped up a bit more like this, when they do have the comfort, when they do have the ball, when they are dominating the game. Can we quickly turn it over and get our exit plan? Can we get our guys to bounce out? Because if we are going to try and press them, or we're going to try and attack them when they're in a bit more of their defensive shape, when they're in their own half, it's going to be really hard, and it's just going to invite us to making a mistake, for one guy to step out of position, perhaps to go and try and confront the ball, and then that'll allow someone space to go and hurt us and really cause us some problems. We kind of want them to get into their shape. We do kind of want them to string a pass or two together and get themselves into that position of, right, we're ready to go and try and attack this match. And this isn't being negative or defensive, but it's just accepting that this is how they're going to play. This is a very common situation that's probably going to happen in the match, and we should be like a coiled spring waiting for this kind of thing to happen. Wait for De Bruyne to walk into midfield, wait for Bellanova to get really high, wait for Zappacosta to go really high, and then all of a sudden, right, can we free Kun up from tracking Zappacosta? Can we allow that to happen by maybe having Engels a bit deeper, by maybe having McGregor a bit deeper? If he did start Bernardo, maybe, yeah, doing that same thing, and just allowing Dyson that little bit of freedom, allowing Kun that little bit of freedom, where it does give them something to think about, like, oh, I can't actually go that high all of a sudden, and it just makes them a lot easier to defend against. You know, I don't think this is a big departure from the normal tactics. I think it's a wee bit of realism, in the sense of, like, we are just going to have less possession, and really, like, if we can allow this game plan to kind of happen, in the sense of, like, we accept where we're going to come up short, we accept where we don't have out and out strength and quality, undeniable players that can just make something happen, and then we look for those opportunities where they will not be able to do anything about it. If Dyson can get the other side of Bellanova, and we can make sure that the midfield is covered well enough that we don't need Dyson to recover all the way back. Like, sure, we want him to recover and be Dyson, of course, but can we let him, stop it around here? Can we leave him on the halfway line once in a while? And then can the rest of the team be switched on enough to see Dyson's free, we've got the ball, let's flip it over, get him up the pitch, get people up in support, and go and try and score the first goal. And I think for me, the first goal of this game is going to be a huge sliding doors moment for how the match actually goes. If Atalanta can open the scoring up in the first 10 or 15 minutes, especially in the first 10, then you've got to fear the Dortmund disaster having a bit of a repeat. But if we can kind of think about Aberdeen against us at the weekend, if you can kind of keep it tight, you're still going to be feisty and getting amongst it. You're not playing 10 at the back or anything, But in the first 10 minutes, if you can make it competitive, make it through lots of 50-50s, no real clear dominant side or a weakness on us that they might try and exploit, if we can make it that tight and that competitive, then from the 10th minute to the 45th minute, if somehow Celtic could get the first goal in this game, then this is where the Celtic optimism creeps back in. But anything could be possible then at that point, because then the shape that we are hoping, or I would say that we would hope that they start to play, they're throwing their front three forward, they throw the fullbacks forward, they've got De Bruyne into midfield, they've then got Pasalic supporting the attack. They're then forced to do that quicker, they're then forced to do that more often, and that could just play into our hands a little bit more. And hey, you know how football goes. It's in a game of moments. It's in a game of decisions. It's about taking your chances from there on in. And that's what we wanted. And that's what we were quite optimistic about going into Dortmund, where if it's a game where they get 5 or 6 chances and we get 5 or 6 chances, then it could be a great game of football. And yeah, we might lose at the end of it, but we would see some progress and we would see the quality of the team be displayed on the biggest stage of them all, which would inject confidence into the squad. And then coming into like this game or future games, we can then maybe, put our shoulders back, put our chin up a wee bit more, be a bit more confident, welcoming Leipzig to Parkhead, going away to Zagreb and doing all the other stuff that we need to do. And for me, like I mentioned in the intro, that is the most important part of this game, is we can come out of it saying, hey, they had this amount of chances, we had that amount of chances, and hey, we could have done a little bit better in attack, maybe we could have been a little bit better in defence, or all the rest of it. But you can clearly see that we went toe-to-toe, we were on the same level, and it was the fine margins that made the difference. Because for me, that's really how this game needs to go. If we do get absolutely hammered again, big questions are going to be asked of Brendan Rodgers and a few of these players as well, particularly in midfield and defence. or maybe attack, depending on the sitters that are missed. We all know that the Celtic forwards are a big fan these days of big chances missed, regardless of how many goals we actually score. I think if we can have a coherent, developed game plan on what we had from Dortmund coming into this one, getting a draw is not going to be a big stretch of the imagination. Scoring the first goal couldn't be a big stretch of the imagination. Ultimately, like I said at the beginning, when this draw was made, you did not expect to get anything from Atalanta. But if we could score 2 goals in this game, I would consider it as a W. It's not going to get us points. It's not going to really change the complexion of much at all. But it would be a tangible metric on progression from last season, or even from the Dortmund game into this one, that we can hang on to, that we can grab, and will give us some seeds to grow some green shoots of progress going into the rest of this Champions League group stage as well. And if we could score 2 goals, then it's all about keeping Atalanta out. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. If you're travelling to the game, travel safely. I hope you all have a great time. Hopefully the result is to all of our liking, of course. On screen are now some other stuff that we've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. Hail, hail, everyone. Moan the hoops.